I need another vid. I'm hungry. You could ask nicely, and you could make videos good enough that more than 12 people watch them. Okay, what do you want? I don't know. Something good? Pizza? No. Stir fry? No. Pasta? Mm-mm. Kid cuisine remake? Gross. Dude, do you want help or not? I'm about to just go in the litter box and use that. Actually, go do that. I think you're onto something. I recently tried this nice local restaurant in New Orleans called Brine. I ordered this appetizer, which ended up captivating me. It was a vegan lentil dip with a scallion pancake to use for dipping. It captivated me so much that I wanted to try to remake it at home. The lentil dip resembled some kind of hybrid between a Tex-Mex style bean dip and a hummus. I didn't have a recipe, but I just threw some things together and tried to make it as close as I could. And scallion pancakes are just really good, and I've never made a real one at home before. So this did take me a few hours, but I'm going to take you through the process in case you're interested. And this starts with a bag of dry lentils, and I'm using green lentils, but I think black lentils would look better. That's what they used at the restaurant anyway. I'm dumping out about a cup or 200 grams worth. What's nice about these when compared to beans or chickpeas is you don't have to soak these overnight because they're so small. So if you want to eat them, they're only about an hour of cooking away. I am rinsing them first in a sieve just to get rid of any dirt or dust on the outside, and then they go into a medium saucepan to which I'm adding 3 cups of chicken stock to. You could definitely boil these in water, but chicken stock is of course going to add more flavor. All I have to do is bring that up to a boil and then lower it to a simmer and cook that until these are tender. They could be done in 30 to 45 minutes, but mine took about an hour total. I just came and tested them every so often and checked how tender they were to the bite. I wanted them pretty mushy so they'd break apart easily in the food processor. Also, they do soak up most of the stock. Ideally, they would take all of it, but I had a little bit left over. Meanwhile, I'm going to prep an aromatic base to add to the dip. That's just 1/2 of a large yellow onion that I've diced pretty small. That's going to go into a pan over medium-high heat with a little bit of oil. I just need to stir those for about 7 minutes until they soften and get a lot of browning around them. At that point, I'm pressing in 2 large cloves of garlic and stirring that for about a minute. Be careful not to burn the fond on the bottom, so adjust your heat as needed. Lastly, I'm just adding in some spices, which are going to give this dip its flavor profile. I've got a teaspoon of ground cumin and a teaspoon of paprika, and then a 1/2 teaspoon each of ground coriander and turmeric. I just want to briefly stir those to get them toasted and bloomed in this heat, and then I'll remove that so it doesn't burn and set it aside until it needs to be added. And now I'll just pull out my food processor and add those cooked lentils. Again, I strained off the excess liquid and set it aside to be added if I needed to thin this out. Then I'm adding that seasoned onion and garlic mixture, a couple of tablespoons of olive oil for richness. Then the only other thing I need is the juice of 1/2 of a lemon and some salt and pepper to taste. I'm going to whiz this up and try to get everything into a fine paste. It might take a few iterations of scraping down the sides and even adding some of that liquid if you need to. I did add some because I wanted this to be a little more spreadable, but just adjust the salt and pepper to your taste, and that's all you need to do for this. I can't say this is beautiful. I mean, it kind of looks like, yeah. But it's going to taste amazing and it's healthy for you, so you can't win them all. But I love the idea of the restaurant to pair this with a scallion pancake as opposed to tortilla chips or something like that. It's just a crispy but super flavorful vessel for something like this. It is a little time consuming and kind of labor intensive, but it's worth it. I'm starting with 2 cups or 240 grams of all-purpose flour into a bowl. I give that a couple of pinches or about a teaspoon or 6 grams of kosher salt. Then I'm adding 2 cups of boiling water. This dough is made that way for science reasons, just trust the process. I had about a 1/4 cup of cold water set aside to add in, but it turns out the boiling water was all I needed, so maybe I would start with 3/4 of a cup of boiling water and have some cold water set aside to adjust to consistency. I'm using a wooden spoon to initially combine that for a few minutes, and then I'll carefully get in there with my hand and start to knead it. It can still be pretty hot, so take some caution. I'm just kneading that by hand in the bowl for about 7 minutes. When it's cohesive enough, you can dump it onto a countertop with a little bit more flour. Mine was a bit wet, so I added a good bit of flour to make it smooth. But when it is smooth, I'm dumping it back into the bowl and covering it with a towel to let it relax for about 30 minutes. Then I can dump it back onto the countertop with some more flour and divide it into 4 portions. This will make 4 decently sized pancakes. With each portion, I'm going to flatten/roll it out into an evenly thin circle. It doesn't need to be paper thin, but we're not making donuts here, so roll it out pretty thin. Then I'm going to pour a couple of drops of sesame oil onto it, using a brush to get that even all over the surface. This is a fat, so it's going to work the same way as butter would in something like biscuits or croissants. We're going to use it to make some layers, which is going to keep them separate, and it'll make them flaky after we cook them. Then we're going to take our circle and roll it up pretty tightly. That's going to again start to make those layers that we want.
At this point, I'm going to seal the edges and start to spiral this around itself, making sure it's tight. I'll tuck the edge under itself like I'm making Icelandic cinnamon rolls. You will need some flour throughout this shaping and rolling process, but just be careful not to use too much. You want this to stick to itself so it doesn't come apart when you're rolling it. But with this spiral, I'm going to flatten it down and then start to roll it out into another circle. We're just doing multiple iterations of this because we want to get those flaky layers, and this is how to do it. Now I'm going to brush on a couple more drops of sesame oil until it's evenly coated. Then comes the scallion part, which by the way, I already had 4 scallions that I chopped up really thinly. You could use the whole bundle if you want, but I think 1 scallion per pancake is a good amount. So I'm sprinkling 1/4 of those evenly over this pancake. You can use the rolling pin to really press them in because you want them to stick. Then I'm going to repeat the process of rolling this up into a log, pressing it together, and then spiraling it. That's going to create more layers and also seal in those scallions. And then lastly, we just need to flatten this out and roll it into a circle one more time. This is the final shape it's going to cook as. You don't want this too thick, but you also don't want it too thin. I'll quickly show you the whole thing one more time at a different angle. Just rolling the dough thin and then coating it in sesame oil and then rolling it into a log and then spiraling, then flattening and rolling it one more time, adding more sesame oil and then the scallions, roll and spiral and then flatten it one last time. And when you have all 4 of your pancakes prepped, I just have them on some parchment paper and we can cook them. I have my cast iron skillet over medium-high heat and I'm adding a good bit of neutral oil into it. We're essentially shallow frying these, so we want a good bit of oil in contact with the whole bottom of the pancake. Once that's pretty hot, I'm going to carefully lay my pancake into it. Make sure to really press it into the pan so you're getting good contact. It should only need a minute or so before you flip it. And at this point, I realized my heat was too high, so this should be done at a more medium-low heat. Those char marks are great, and it's not burnt. I just want to be a little more careful with this. After a minute on each side, if you have good browning on this, then you're done. I'll show you a little nicer one with more even browning after I learned to turn down the heat. And of course, if it's not brown enough after that 1 minute, you can keep flipping it until you get your desired browning. These things are epic as a vegan flatbread. They'd be really good with curries or really with anything that you'd eat with bread. Traditionally, they're just served with their own soy sauce and vinegar-based dipping sauce. I'm just cutting this into 6 wedges here so I can serve it with the dip. Then I'm getting a serving dish and spooning a couple of big dollops of that lentil dip. Scatter the wedges around. You can probably do it better than me. Then I'm just garnishing with some chopped green onion and some pine nuts because I have those. Cilantro or parsley would also be a good idea. The restaurant served it with some squash, which I didn't want to make, so I didn't put it there. But yeah, this is a really simple dish, and it's very appetizer-y. I could eat it as a meal, no problem, but I know not everyone works that way. I know it might not be worth investing the time to make something simple like this, but if you're like me, then you love the kitchen, and this is a fun activity. Let's get to the taste test.
Yeah, so this is kind of a lot of work for an appetizer style dish like this. It took me a couple of hours, but you could shave some of that time off if you bought some of those frozen paratha that I've used before. I mean, the lentil dip is super easy. You just toss them into some stock and then let them boil. Meanwhile, you prepare all the other stuff and then you can mix it together in the food processor. Unlike something like hummus, if you use dried chickpeas, it would take overnight to soak them and longer to boil them. But it's time to taste this stuff. Cheers. I mean, that's surprisingly pretty spot on to what I had at the restaurant. I mean, the scallion pancake is easy to replicate because it's pretty uniform, but I had no idea what was in that lentil dip and I just tossed some spices in to kind of make it curry-like. Whatever it is, this is awesome. And even after sitting for several minutes, this pancake is still crispy and flaky. Amazing. This is kind of similar to the oxtail hummus that I made last year as a short. Sometimes I just enjoy setting aside a day or at least a few hours to do something like this. It's therapeutic, and to me, the reward is absolutely worth it. But I don't know, I hope this video serves some purpose. I don't know if anyone's gonna make this, but maybe you enjoyed watching me throw this together. I mean, the scallion pancake is worth making on its own. Just make a dipping sauce with it and it's lovely. But that's gonna do it for me today. Thank you all for watching, be blessed, and I'll see you next time. I mean, there's gotta be more unappetizing looking foods out there, right?